Hello, this video was recorded during our event Engaging Citizens and Civil Society in Interreg, held online on the 11th of March 2022. In this video, you will listen from Ieva CESNULAITYTE, policy analyst from OECD, about the recent DG Regio and OECD pilot project Engaging Citizens in Cohesion Policy. You will also learn about different resources and tools made available from OECD on innovative citizen participation.
So my name is Ieva CESNULAITYTE and I work at the OECD as a policy analyst. And as colleagues have already mentioned, we've been cooperating in the past year and a half with the European Commission DG Regio on a specific pilot project. And of course, together with Sophie and Simona, who are present here today. So I'm very happy that they're here too. So I'm going to give you a little bit of details about this cooperation that we did together and some of the key insights from the report that was published yesterday that sort of summarize all of the lessons that we've learned throughout this cooperation with all of these 4 different authorities, including Interreg. So a little bit about the project. The goal was to sort of kickstart the engagement of citizens and civil society in the implementation and cohesion policy, and as Francesco mentioned, to understand what is the status quo, what are all of the authorities doing right now, what could be done more, and how we could, help and encourage them. And the 5 different organizations that were selected were the Regione Emilia-Romagna in Italy, Regional Ministry of Cantabria in Spain, CUT Poland, so Center for European Transport Projects, and then Interreg Flanders, the Netherlands program, and Interreg Romania, Bulgaria program. And we worked with each of them to identify what are their needs and how can we help them take citizen engagement to the next level. And this is sort of a brief overview, what we ended up doing with each 5 of them. So the Emilia-Romagna region was sort of keen to have local authorities and urban authorities engage citizens in the development of their territorial development strategies. So we've organized a workshop with them where we gave them sort of the foundations of citizen engagement and discussed these issues with them. And then together we have prepared specific guidelines for the development of territorial development strategies with the engagement of citizens that then the local and urban authorities can use to prepare those. And then with the Regional Ministry of Cantabria, we have developed a pilot representative deliberative process. So as Francesco mentioned, the Messiah Citizens Jury, which gathered a group of 35 randomly selected citizens that represented the area that there were citizens from each of the smaller 10 municipalities within the region. And they were brought together and they met for several months, almost every weekend. And what they did was they learned, first of all, about cohesion policy and about some of the most pertinent issues within it. And then they deliberated with the help of facilitators to provide then concrete recommendations for the ministry. And the main question that they were mandated to answer is how can Messiah use the European cohesion funds to accomplish the green transition, but also ensuring equal distribution of jobs and inclusivity along the way. So citizens have produced really substantial recommendations, and now the government is in the process of taking a look at them and using them to develop solutions. So they also actually, as part of this whole process, there was a call for proposals and ideas and projects to all different stakeholders that wanted to submit something, and citizens had a chance to also include them in their discussions. And then we worked together with Interreg Flanders and the Netherlands, and Sophia will explain in more detail exactly what we did. But what we did is, as she mentioned, prepared a plan for a pilot deliberative process, such as the one in Messiah. However, this one would be a cross-border one. And as she mentioned, we were kind of stuck working on gaining that political willingness of the monitoring committee to go ahead with it, but the plan was kind of prepared, and hopefully in the future at some point it can happen. And we worked with them also to prepare a citizen participation playbook for the beneficiaries of the program, which is sort of a guide which guides step by step the beneficiaries that are applying to the program. How can they involve citizens as part of their projects that might be funded? Then we worked with Interreg Romania, Bulgaria, and of course Simona will explain a bit further, to develop a checklist for quality citizen participation processes. So it is all about what a quality citizen participation process entails and how to ensure that the process that either you implement or you commission meets the quality criteria and is the best that it can be. And then together with the Center for European Transport Projects in Poland, we developed also a set of citizen participation guidelines that are specifically tailored for transport infrastructure projects because they do have certain specificities. And yesterday we did launch a report, Engaging Citizens in Cohesion Policy, that I will share in the chat in a moment, or maybe the colleagues will share, that I encourage you to read, which details all of these different projects and also links to all of these different outputs I mentioned. So the plans, the guidelines, everything that you can have a look at. So it's at your disposal. And it also provides various lessons learned throughout our cooperation together, as well as recommendations for the EU cohesion community. So now I will quickly tell you a little bit of some of the main recommendations. I won't spend a lot of time here because Olivier has actually also covered some of the main reasons of involving citizens, and specifically in cohesion policy, which I think are quite similar to what he was saying. So it's great because we're on the same page. So engaging citizens in cohesion policy can really help ensure that projects funded actually address citizens' most pressing needs, but also, they take into account their experience and knowledge. And what I also have to say from some of them, what Olivier was saying was some of the pitfalls that, potentially we sometimes think that what citizens are going to contribute with might be too outside the box or not necessarily applicable and possible to implement. So here, I think it's the responsibility of those organizing a citizen participation process to provide them with all of the necessary information and guidance needed so that they can develop recommendations that are very much applicable and helpful in a specific situation, because they do have this experience and knowledge that is personal, that can provide different perspectives on the issue that you might not necessarily have and inform about their needs. But it is also up to us to let them know what are the rules and regulations and where are the limits and what kind of ideas that they develop are actually promising and which ones are maybe not necessarily going to meet the goal. Another key reason to engage citizens in cohesion policy is to, of course, enhance the inclusion and diversity of various different actors that participate and make sure that everyone is represented and there is a legitimacy of this process that is enhanced. Thirdly, there's also increased awareness and understanding amongst the public about the process, the cohesion policy process, because what is really key in all of this in engaging citizens is actually to provide only the key and necessary and crucial information that can help them, advise you and give you meaningful recommendations, but in a very simple and clear manner that is not formulated in a bureaucratic way, because then definitely it's going to be boring and they won't be able to understand. So it's also up to us to frame the task and all of the necessary resources in a way that they can actually understand and relate to. Because, for example, the Messiah Citizens Jury was a very ambitious and complicated question that they had to help answer. How can we use these funds to transition to a greener economy, but make sure everyone is, no one is disadvantaged? And they were definitely able to discuss and provide very complex recommendations because they did have, apologies, there's some noise outside. They did have the facilitation and the information needed to do so. And finally, it can help preempt public conflict or state-made situations. So for example, we found that this is specifically the case in transport infrastructure projects where you do need people to agree, for example, where a highway should go so that no one feels disadvantaged in a situation, and citizen participation processes can be very helpful to do so. And some of these key recommendations that we talk about in the report, and I encourage you to take a look at, is that number one, citizen and stakeholder participation is not exactly the same. And usually this is a mistake that a lot of people do, that we encounter when we work at the OECD. And we have to use different methods to engage citizens and engage stakeholders, because stakeholders, such as, for example, associations, NGOs, companies, they have the interest and the motivation and the knowledge to participate. So for them, an online public consultation where they ask to submit proposals might be completely fine, because they do this every day and they know how it works. However, if you want to engage the everyday citizen, you have to choose the method that they can actually engage with. So you would need to provide them the necessary information, the time, the resources, the facilitation, and motivate them to participate. So this is something that is very, very important. Secondly, we've noticed that most of the authorities either provide information to citizens or conduct consultations with citizens, so which are the two first levels of citizen participation, as you can see on my slide. But quite little of them actually engage them, which is when you provide citizens resources and time and opportunity to actually be a partner of a public authority, rather than just asking for their feedback or providing information. What we also found is that it is important to involve citizens at all different stages of cohesion policy cycle. This is exactly what Olivier was mentioning before, that there are different ways you can find to engage them when you are in the programming stage, but also in the implementation stage and also in the monitoring stage. And I believe we will see some examples about this further in the panel. It is also important to secure required resources, because it is really not something that can be done just, very quickly, very easily, with not a lot of expertise. And so this is exactly why Francesco and the colleagues are working on ramping up this competence. So the different resources that are crucial are the human resources, some financial resources, technical resources, and enough time. And what we also recommend is to create the conditions for beneficiaries to also involve citizens in the programming or in the implementation of projects. Not just, it's just not just the managing authority or the secretariat that can do that, but it can be done on different levels. And this is exactly what we worked on with the Interreg Flanders, the Netherlands. So the playbook specifically for beneficiaries. And as colleagues already also mentioned, ensuring impact and political buy-in is super important. So I think it is telling that, we didn't really have a full go-ahead from the monitoring authority to implement one of the deliberative processes. And there's no way and no point to actually do so if you do not have this political buy-in. And whereas in Besaya, we worked with getting all of the different local authorities and mayors on board and parties on board before we actually kicked off this process, because securing this buy-in is going to ensure that any participation process has impact, and a clear link to impact and how any recommendations provided by citizens are going to change the decision-making process or impact on the program outcomes is the key motivation for citizens to actually even participate, because citizens can feel whether some kind of participation process is worth their time or not. And to show that it's worth their time, you have to show that there will be an impact, some kind of a connection with the decision-making. This doesn't mean that you have to take into account and implement everything and every recommendation they suggest, because they're just recommendations, but you have to take them seriously and give them feedback, which of them will be implemented, which will not, and why. And finally, closing the feedback loop is also extremely important to maintain this trust and this relationship that is created. Sometimes there's also different barriers of citizen participation that maybe do not allow everyone to participate equally. So to ensure there are no barriers, we have to frame a very clear task. What are we asking citizens to do? What is the direct link to the decision making? So how we will use whatever they produce, use the simple language if possible, and if the process requires a lot of their time, to compensate for time and travel, to provide digital support if needed, because there might be groups that don't necessarily have the same level of access, and to communicate effectively to reach different groups, as well as provide opportunities to learn and information that is needed for that. And what we also found that it is quite rare that these processes are evaluated, but it can be super helpful to learn from the processes you've done, what you did well, what you didn't, and share with others. I recommend highly to evaluate and reflect about the process, citizen participation process implemented. So just to wrap up, I wanted to share that beyond this report that just published yesterday, we do have other tools that are at the OECD. So this deliberative democracy toolbox that includes 4 different papers that are all about these representative deliberative processes, such as citizens' juries and assemblies, like the one implemented in Bisaya. So we encourage you to also take a look if you are interested in these more innovative citizen participation methods. And we also invite you to check out our blog, Participo, where we post shorter, interesting pieces and interviews with different experts and practitioners implementing innovative citizen participation processes that you might find interesting. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions